doing. And Judah Wickower is going to manage the equipment. My friend, we can rock and roll when you're ready. Good Monday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us. The show is presented by the fabulous team at Keller Williams Alliance, a brand you can count on in Central Virginia. Keller Williams Alliance. Today's show airs and originates in downtown Charlottesville, Virginia, but our audience is Charlottesville-wide, Albemarle County-wide, Central Virginia-wide, Commonwealth, country, and worldwide. And you, the viewer and listener, are able to shape the discussion of this show by offering your thoughts in the comment section. Today's show, I think, is going to be absolutely dynamite. Not only do we have the distinguished gentleman, Keith Smith, but we have our friends, Nikki Chambliss and Jason Kirby in the house. Three very seasoned and experienced agents, one a team leader. And I think this program is just a perfect opportunity for you guys to ask questions and learn about a market that has been dubbed the shift market.
Jeez, who dubbed that?
In the industry. Judah Wickower, if we can go to the studio camera and welcome our panel, my friends, as the questions are already coming in. First, good morning to everybody. How are you guys?
Morning, everybody. Morning. Good morning.
I'm great. I'm a year older now.
Oh, happy birthday!
Year older.
Yesterday.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I wish you happy birthday,
Thank
didn't
you.
I?
You did. You're good.
Okay, good.
And Yona texted me or messaged me. You're set.
Oh, I feel terrible. Happy birthday.
Oh, no, that's fine. Please don't feel bad. It's a great Monday.
What'd you do?
Well, so I hung out with my kids for the most part.
Cool.
I had cake for breakfast.
Nice.
Chocolate cheesecake, to be specific, in case anyone ever wants to give me cake.
Did you get to play any music?
Oh, no, I didn't. No.
Because I know that's important to you.
Oh my gosh, but I have so many. We've got like 3 gigs coming up, 3 weekends in a row in October, which is great. So we just keep adding more and more bookings.
So on top of being an awesome mom, an awesome human, and running a team at Keller Williams, you also play music. So talk a little bit about that.
Oh my gosh,
I know only a little bit
it.
about it. But
Well, so I grew up doing music. Like from the time I was old enough to try to sing, my dad had a microphone in front of my face. So so like those of you who hear me talk about being introverted and all that are often shocked when I'm like, oh yeah, I like being on stage. But that's a whole different thing. So yeah, I love music, I love writing, I love playing. With this band, I do a little bit on the keys. Grew up playing piano, the required instrument learning, and I loved it.
That's
Bless
awesome.
my piano teacher's heart. Truly.
So 31?
Yeah,
21.
You're my favorite person.
Happy
You're just a
31st.
liar. I've burned the whole 21-year-old. Come on.
I want to do this.
Would you want to be 21 again?
No.
Yeah.
But would you want to be 31 again?
No, not really. Because
No?
there's something about that, having the 4 in front of it, where you just have less cares to give about things that don't really matter.
Yeah.
And I find that to be really true. Like, people told me about that, and I was like, And then I'm finding it to be very accurate.
Very well
Letting
said.
go.
So we're learning something
Let
new
go.
about Nikki.
Oh, 43, by the way. That's how old I am.
Happy birthday.
Like the liqueur.
Like your favorite liquor?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
All right.
Your mom's watching. Mary Kirby, hello.
Excellent.
I feel like I know you, Mary Kirby. I love you, Mary Kirby. Welcome to the broadcast.
So Jason, tell us, you've been on the show a bunch of times, and
Yeah.
thank you for doing that. So
Sure.
tell us something new about you, right? We learned about Nikki's music. Tell us something that everybody doesn't quite know about Jason Kirby.
Gosh, that is going to make me sound boring. Thank you, Keith.
Oh, sorry about that,
There's
buddy.
nothing interesting. I don't ride a motorcycle up to my music concerts or anything like that, like Nikki does. No, I spent the weekend, we went to the Alice in Wonderland event with Clued Up Games here in Charlottesville on Saturday. It was great. It was great. It was like if you like Pokemon Go and you know Alice in Wonderland, it's wonderful. Imagine like Pokemon Go but with puzzles and clues, and we got to walk around areas of the downtown that we haven't really spent before. You drive past these buildings, but to actually look at them and be up close was a neat experience. And we had kiddos and family there, and it was a really good time. You have to watch, though, handing off a phone to a child with some sort of navigation game with crosswalks is
know.
not a good combination. So my apologies to everyone driving downtown over the weekend. It won't happen again.
We just learned that you're super smart, is what we just.
Dude is so smart. So guys, where do you want to start? We got, we're now September 12th. We are, what, a hop, skip, and a jump away from Q4.
Yes, we are.
I mean, we're a hop, skip, and a jump away from the holiday season. Where do you guys want to begin? Keith, how about you?
Yeah, so I just wanted to chime in a little bit. We've kind of been talking about this hyper local market. We started it on, what's today, Monday? We started it on Friday on this conversation. It's a term that I learned when we were up in last week up in D.C. from Lawrence Yun of the chief economist for NAR. It's a new terminology, and it's interesting because we're seeing everything from the mass media that the market is kind of receding, right? A little bit on that end of it. And we'll talk a little bit later about a listing that we put on Friday, beginning of the show. By the end of the show, we had multiple offers. But are you guys in a hyper-local market? Are we seeing things that are happening similar in the macro market, right? Does that question make any sense, Nikki?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, do you want to start with that one, or?
You know, it's interesting. I don't know if, as the inventory dwindled, right, and we wound up with such a short supply, we seem to have folks who are like, hey, I want to be walking distance to amenities, who are like, all right, I'll drive half an hour to a restaurant if I need to.
Sure.
And so I think we saw a lot of bleed over from what might have been a micro market into more of a regional market here. Your Charlottesville buyer became a Waynesboro buyer, became a Stanton buyer, and a Lake buyer. Though what I'm noticing is there's definitely a difference in terms of price point. So if we look at those as niches as well, we put a listing on in Waynesboro, priced attractively in appropriate condition, and we had multiple offers as well. But it's also not unusual to see homes go a few weeks right now. Interestingly, of everything that's currently under contract, 20% of those homes had a price reduction before they got their contract, right? So I think we're looking at it, Keith, in terms of, yeah, you're seeing the little markets, but you're also seeing in terms of price point. And that's part of the interest rates, right?
So, Nikki, you're a team member, team leader, all your members. We've been discussing, I saw a really great post by Matt Neese this morning talking about that. So are these price changes like just, okay, we went a little strong, we're back to where the market is, or are we going, or values going backwards? Does that make sense?
Well, so I think the market is softening, and it's not so much about value going backwards, it's about where you can start with pricing on a listing. And part of this is agents needing to learn how to, or improve their game, or shift the conversations they're having with sellers, which is challenging to do. It's simple, and that does not mean it's easy, right? So an agent can do all that they can and want and say all the right things, and a seller still say, nope, list it here. And when an agent's saying, hey, the market value of your home is this, and we should price it here to be strategic in our methods, which is what we should always do as real estate professionals, is be strategic about how we're doing things. The seller can still say, yeah, that's great, thanks, but no thanks. And I do think there is some of that happening, and I think that is shifting. I think that the sellers are starting to realize, oh, I really should listen to what I'm being recommended to do. Because when you price it higher than would be recommended, and I'm not saying by any particular person, I'm saying by what the market recommends and shows, then what's going to happen is you're going to end up getting less for that house than you could have had you started with the right strategic pricing.
Multiple folks are asking what's softening a market mean. Who wants to take that?
What we've been seeing is that when we think it's relative to what was going on in the spring. So even though when I say that what's currently under contract, 1 in 5 of those homes had a price reduction, it's important to also note on the other side of that coin, we're still at 100% list to sold. So what is selling for the price it was listed at, even if it was right before they received their offer. And these reductions are not, in many cases, large reductions. So I think on an anecdotal level, my buyers, compared to 6 months ago, are definitely less anxious, less eager, and are a little more strategic. And my sellers are a little more anxious and a little more eager, but because they're sitting on so much equity, we're not in like a panic zone at all.
No.
And I think even if we looked at these reductions, I don't think they're a retreat in sales prices. It's a retreat in where they thought sales prices were going to go. And that's a different animal. So
said.
a softening market is just not as intense. So it's
It's
still a
not,
great market.
Like we're getting, not the crazy barrage of showings where
Yeah.
you can't actually even see a house and you have to decide whether or not to make an offer. And all of
Yeah.
the crazy multiple offers with outrageous terms for any market that's not right now, right? That hasn't been the last 2.5 years. Time on market's a little longer and still not as long as what we would call a normal market, right? So all of those things are what I'm talking about when I say softening,
Yeah.
in addition to the details of what that means, right?
So tag Matt Neese if you wouldn't mind.
I will. I'll do it right
I'm
now.
going to actually quote him off of his Facebook because this is kind of relevant to what we're talking about. This is Matt Neese speaking. We are seeing price reductions across the board because unrealistic sellers and inexperienced agents, in quotations, myself included, are still trying to sell it in inflated hypermarket. So that's what, in my definition, softening means. We're getting back to it. To your point,
Yeah.
Jason, I just took a look at what sold in the last 7 days, right? There was, in the car footprint, there was 57 homes. So that's just everything that's encompasses car on that. To your point, list versus sale, it's not quite 100%, but it's list price, the median list price was 412 and it's sold at 411. That's pretty damn
Yeah.
close to 100%.
Yeah.
So what's happening is the market is adjusting from our advice to where it is, but we're not seeing situations where they're listing at 412 and they're selling at 380.
Yeah.
To me, that is a market going backwards on this end of it. So when those ratios between listing and selling are close, that means the market is getting it right on that stuff.
We got this comments coming in from Steven, who's watching in Belmont. He says, please ask the panel what's going to happen if rates go up again. We all see that the Fed is going to raise rates in September and again in October. Please ask the panel this. I will caveat by saying there's not a direct correlation with what Powell is doing with raising rates and how it impacts mortgage rates, although there is an indirect correlation, and I think we all expect rates to go up. Quentin Beckham, welcome to the program. So why don't we throw this question to you guys anywhere you want to go. I think the expectations is you're going to see rates go up over the next 3 to 6 months. How is that going to impact the market? The question from Stephen in Belmont. Who wants to touch that?
Jump in, guys.
All right. Well, I think that every conversation that I'm hearing, and none of us can truly predict the future, is saying that we're expected to land somewhere around 6% as our end, hey, this is where we expect things to stay for a while once it gets there, right? With all sorts of exceptions and caveats to that, like VA loans and 15-year versus 30 and adjustable rate. But that is what I am hearing, and the impact that we're going to see from that is it's making people rethink home buying. For the last, I don't know, probably 10 years, but I can definitely speak to the last almost 6 that I've been in real estate. It has been much easier and simpler for the new home buyer without savings to purchase a home that does not make them house broke, right? And I think that the way that we go about that and asking for closing costs and all of these things, we're now shifting more to hey, the conversation needs to be to buy a home, you really want to have a down payment. Do you have to? No. And we don't want you in a house that's going to screw up your life and budget, and we want you to be able to stabilize that expense.
We've been discussing that, Jerry and I, quite a bit last week on the professionals at this table, the professionals that we work with, sometimes counsel people, maybe this is not the right time to buy. Jason, you want to take a stab at this?
Well, the interest rate question, it's a really interesting one, and I
Do
think
you get it a lot?
yeah, it's the thing that's underlying most conversations, but it's having a twofold impact essentially, which may turn it out to be a wash. And my point with that is that when I'm talking with buyers and sellers, because I work with both pretty regularly, while it's definitely impacted buyers' ability to borrow, it's also impacting sellers' desire to sell in this way. If they're looking at downsizing, it makes almost no sense for a seller client of mine to consider downsizing if they're going to pay 20% more for the smaller home, because a lot of people either bought in the past couple years in a low interest rate environment or refinanced during a low interest rate environment. So double the interest rate to get a smaller home doesn't make sense. And so what I think we're looking at here is the interest rates are going to have like you said, a lot of it's perception, right? But if it does cost more to borrow, and there are fewer homes coming on the market as a result of higher rates, because everyone needs to move somewhere, we could still look at rising prices in a rising interest rate market.
Okay, so I can offer a first-hand perspective on this, and he knows about this, Keith does, my wife who's watching knows about this. I don't think anyone else does, but I'm still going to air the personal laundry here because it makes for great content for the show. We got a cold call offer on our house. This happened 2 weeks ago, literally something that was like, we have to consider this. Okay, like we have to consider this, that kind of offer. Here's the challenge we have. The house we currently have is on a 15-year, not a 30, but a 15. We've been overpaying it. It's got an interest rate of 3.75%. Okay, so the businessman in me has persuaded my wife, who's watching, and I love you, sweetheart, I really, really do, that we have to consider this. Here's the challenge we have. There's not much out there. The stuff that's out there is super expensive. And we're fortunate that we can put 20% down on whatever we're gonna buy. Fortunate, I understand how fortunate we are here. But the rate's gonna be at like 5 3/4.
Yeah.
Okay, so like the challenge is, do we wait? Do we do this? When we have it would be a 2-point increase on what we're paying right now. Not only the 2-point increase, but substantially more than what we paid in March 2020 for our house.
So
March 2020, right at the top when we all thought
Yeah.
the world was collapsing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the predicament we're in right now.
Yeah,
A lot of
and-
sellers go through that. There'll be less homes on the market, right?
Yeah, so thank you for sharing with that.
Yeah.
Jerry, thank you for being authentic. I love you for doing it. But the reality of it is, I think, the market has settled in. We've been talking about this for quite some time. Everybody's now getting used to this percentage rate of being the norm, right? And so this weekend, Yona and I have multiple contracts coming in, everything from 215 to 225 affordable housing units to 500,000. All very different, all different clients, all different scenarios, all different micro markets. All of them, by the way, at 6%. All of them, the 500,000 is at 20% down. The affordable housing units is at 3% down. And I had a conversation with the 225, 215 buyers over the weekend when I was working with them. And I said, so tell me, how do you feel about the interest rates going up? And you know, to a person, their answer was, yeah, but 3 years ago I was paying $800 for a rental, and now I'm paying $1,800. Right? I need to stop that bleeding.
Yes.
Right? So I need to stop that. If it's at 6%, that's fine. Right? On Wednesday, we're going to bring in some mortgage experts to talk about interest rates. But if it drops down a couple of points, I'll refinance. But right now, the conversation at that price point this weekend was, I need to stop the bleeding. On the higher end, very interesting profile. We had multiple offers, about 5 offers. Buyer profile was all exactly the same. Sold their home, renting, had a pot full of cash, putting 20% down, financing the balance of it. Waived home inspections, back to that whole insanity that we were a little while ago. So what I mean by micro markets, each section is very different.
Yeah.
It was a very
Yeah.
enlightening weekend on this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Jason?
No, I think it's true to form, absolutely. Yeah, we often, as a result of the Great Recession, look at real estate as a national market. It really isn't, except for 2 exceptions, the Great Depression and the Great Recession. It's always been a local, regional market.
So we call it the time of great unpleasantness, by the way. That's the required term du jour on the
Yes,
on
my
the show.
experiences doing that were incredibly unpleasant.
Mr. Williamson has coined it, and I've been tasked with 2 things: one, get his name right, right, and secondly, make sure I call it.
He's the president of the Free Enterprise Forum. Neil Williamson is who we're referencing right now. So let me throw this to you guys. What do we think is going to happen come Q4? Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas.
Great question.
Got a lot of holidays here. The weather changes. Is that going to slow, impact, or expedite the market in any way?
Based on what I'm seeing with the emotions of the clients I'm working with and the agents I'm talking to, I think it is likely to do that. Our quiet period during the summer, I think, was an indication of a return to normal, that seasonality. So I think we're going to experience a fall bump in activity like you've been seeing over the weekend, and then possibly a quietening in the winter. though I think expecting a spring market to start late winter is a good idea. So
You think so?
I think so. I think with sellers that I'm talking with, we're looking at the time frame for for selling. We're looking at if you can't make it out on the market by close to Thanksgiving, let's think hard
January.
about what we're planning. Yeah, exactly. And some of them, I would love for them to be the first ones out of the gate in the late winter.
I have to agree 100% with you, Jason. I don't think there's a spring market any longer. I really don't. I think spring happens in January as far as housing goes.
Yes.
Now, unless we have, God forbid, another repeat of the time of great unpleasantness.
Yes.
But all indicators are showing that we're probably not going there, except for some of this crazy loan stuff that I'm a little nervous about. But that being said, I think you're going to see that. Nikki, with your team members, are you seeing like the tempo and the excitement picking up a little bit amongst buyers and sellers?
So I do feel like as a whole, what I'm seeing is that whole back to normal flow of real estate seasonality, right? So we did as a whole experience things slowing down a little. And there are always exceptions to that because there are always buyers looking to buy and sellers looking to sell who it does not matter what the season is, it's still in their best interest to continue looking, right? Kind of like I expect during this holiday season, there will still be buyers looking. And you should count on the fact that those buyers are really serious and ready to buy.
Oh, yeah.
Because we are going back to more of a normal, I think people are tired of the craziness of it, whether you're a seller or buyer. The insanity that has been the market for the last 2 years, it's wearing on everyone.
Yeah, fatigue.
Truly, buyer, seller, realtor, all of the fatigue is there. Lender, probably home inspector and appraiser. I think we're all ready to go more back to that normal seasonality just for the sake of everyone's mental health.
It's interesting you should say that. At the car event for the economic forecast, I was talking to a bunch of agents, and you can feel the, hey, I'm ready for it to get back to normal. You know, we all did well. Let's face it. Let's call it what it is. We all did well, but, you know, we were all a little bit on edge. So it was funny. Yona and I were talking about it this morning on the way in. It's just I had working with a couple of agents, and agents that would never snap were starting to be a little not themselves.
Yes, most
Yeah,
definitely.
I've noticed that a lot. And I think it just happens so quickly.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I know we got some questions on the feed, or
We do.
If you
Awesome.
want to jump into that, or
Yeah, absolutely. So this is for Jason Kirby specifically. When you're meeting with a client and they have unreasonable expectations when it comes to price, how do you manage those expectations and how do you come to common ground? Because the last thing you want is a price point that's out of the gates that's way too high. I'm seeing a lot of that on Zillow, and I'm intelligent enough to see that these price points are not where they should be. How do you help the client understand where the price point should be? And that right there is from Grayson. Grayson, I love when you watch
question.
and listen to the show.
That's a great question, Grace. And I think it comes down to really what was in your question, helping them understand. Oftentimes, I've noticed agents will get into a very contrarian position with their client, and it becomes a debate about a particular thing. And you never want to be debating with a client. What you really want to be doing is trying to get the best information you can from the market and then figuring out what does this mean for your home. So, for example, and this means going beyond the headlines. Let me give you a headline number, and so let's look at Albemarle County. I'm working with a client in Albemarle County. If I were to look at the July days on market and look at what's currently on market now for median days on market, I could tell you that days on market has increased by 700%, and that's accurate. Now, that's a really scary thing, and if we're at the table, you're probably going to have to excuse yourself and change your underwear. But if I actually use real numbers and say the difference is it was 8 days on market in July, which is crazy, and now it's 56 days on market, that's something a little more concrete and we can plan around. So it's good numbers, how to interpret those, and then working with your client to understand. And you're both trying to achieve the same thing, and I think that's lost oftentimes.
I think you handled that pretty darn well.
I think you handled it really well. I happen to
You're so good at this.
I happen to have a book in front of me written by Gary Keller called Shift, and I actually opened it up to pricing ahead of the market, right?
Right.
Yes.
And that is the skill that we bring to the table. That we need to price ahead of the market. We need to understand. You know, we break out our crystal balls and our wands, and we have
Sure.
fun and do all
Yeah.
this stuff. But the reality of it is, we need to try to stay ahead of that, and then I tell folks all the time, we're not in the sales business, we're in the education business, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to educate
Right.
our client to go ahead and go and do that. And I'm so glad you did that because, until we start hitting 50, 60 days on market, it is a seller's market, period.
Completely.
End of story.
We all buy it's a seller's market? Are we all in agreement there?
I believe it is a
yeah.
seller's market,
Yeah.
absolutely. By almost
Absolutely.
any measure, it's a seller's market.
Okay.
So I'm going
Okay.
to be the odd man out on that. That's the reason I like the term hyper-local market, because it may not be a seller's market in some,
Certainly not in Nelson County.
not Nelson County right now, because
Yeah.
they're 50% upside down, right?
Yeah.
It may not be in Buckingham.
And by upside down, he means year over year, the inventory sales are down 50% year over year. That's what he means. He doesn't mean the values of the home are upside
That's
down.
it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
Nelson
That was
County
a poor choice of words.
Inventory is down 50%, sales inventory year over year. Our pal Kerry Griggs, watching the program.
Hey, Kerry.
One of the few
Hey.
people in Charlottesville, Virginia that have equivalent energy to me, Kerry Griggs.
He's a great
He says, what a great panel you have here. Panel, Nikki, if you could go first, where do you see the market going in the next 18 to 24 months?
Oh gosh. Oh man. Okay, so truly, I try to stay a little closer than 2
want it?
years out because no, I don't.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure with that.
No,
There's
I
a lot
don't
of
want
pressure
it.
with that.
Okay, I'll take it back.
You wear it better than I do anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you need a crown with that.
Thank you
so
for having fun.
I do think that it'll be easier to tell that whole 18 to 24 months as we get through the next 6, right? Truly, I kind of take these things in 6
safe
months.
answer.
No, but I take these in 6-month chunks, right?
Yes.
My expectation is that over the next 6 months to 12, that we'll land somewhere with that whole 6% rate that we talked about earlier. And we're still going to be short inventory, and there is no world that exists in which builders can catch us up. And as far as local markets go, we have a built-in stability of economy when it comes to our home sales. We have people who are in and out with UVA, with NGIC, with the contracting companies, with some of our larger local, oh gosh, I can't even think of names right now, but our tech bubble area, we have quite a few other industries that have been growing up over the last 5 to 10 years that create transition of people in and out of jobs, usually growing from where they had been to the next level, and then sometimes leaving Charlottesville, growing to that next level, going to DC often, depending on the industry. And it just builds in this whole ability to have that need, that desire. People will need homes no matter what, right? As opposed to an area like Orlando, when COVID first hit, we still had buyers and sellers, and ours shot up immediately. My brother, who was trying to sell his house in Orlando, though, it was like a ghost town there. Their entire economy was just tanked.
Well, that's that back to my micro
Yes.
market.
So when I'm looking, though, at 18 to 24 months, I don't expect that too much will change. I am very, very curious to see what happens with our interest rate, because that does matter. And I'm very curious to see what happens in the next 18 to 24 months is trying to implement things that will take 10 and 15 and 20 years to help out with our affordable housing and with building so that we have more places for people to live so
Yeah.
that our inventory is not so tight.
Yeah,
and
I'm
I will say
sorry.
that car GMN that we were in, it was really great seeing some
Yeah.
of those plans. I wish I could remember his name right off, and I don't see my
Well,
car email yet.
all those were rentals.
Not all of them, though.
Well, except for North Point, which is
The-
quite a substantial
Yeah.
way off. Jason, I'd love you to tackle it. I'm going to jump in on my opinion.
Sure. I think, and Carrie and I talk about this quite a bit too sometimes, and I usually will tell clients that my crystal ball is broken.
I've got 3 here if you want
Right?
one.
There's a lot of pressure on this ball.
What I think.
Leave it alone, Keith.
Thank
Leave
you.
it alone.
I need a moment now.
That sounds like a Keith Smith comment.
Leave it alone, Keith.
Okay, I'll leave it alone.
If we
Yes,
see
dear.
interest rates continue to increase and it has that trickle-down effect into the mortgage rates, then yes, it's going to impact buying power. What we're also going to see, though, is a greater constriction on the housing supply. So I still think it is, if I were to guess and bet some money, we're looking at rates of appreciation going into the future that are just way more modest than we're used to in the past. And if you were to look at inflation, it might even be less than inflation. So if you were to look at it in real terms, maybe you're not making forward progress on holding an investment like that. But that's what I think I see. What concerns me the most isn't so much, well, what concerns me the most is I think the estimate is we're looking at 5.1 million transactions this year in the United States. The last time there were 5.1 million transactions in the United States, we had 1/3 the number of agents that we have right now.
Yeah.
So agent to agent with Gary, that's my greatest concern.
Yeah, that's a topic
Good take
for
right
a
there.
different show and different conversation about where we as an industry are going to settle who's in the industry. I think you're going to see some seismic shifts, some shifts going on that. A couple of quick things on that. I've been at this for 3.5 decades, and it's just amazing me how the last 4 to 5 years, we're actually talking about forecasting in the future for interest rates. That's never happened.
Oh, really?
In the decades. Nobody's ever said, we think this is where we're going to go. We think
Well, that's
that we're
because we got seduced and almost grew to expect 3% and 4% rates. And when the market gets romanticized by cheap money, it becomes the expectation as opposed to an anomaly.
And we
it was an
talked-
anomaly during COVID.
So we talked about that, a million times, that my fear was everybody thought
And
that
that's
was-
exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah,
Everybody,
and now there's panic.
Well, I think they're settling in. I don't really think there's panicking. And I'm just telling you by what I'm seeing on the street, by working with clients. He said, okay, we've come to the realization this is the new normal. You want to jump in real quick,
but
then I'll
you're
finish
talking
up?
about over 10, 20, 15, at least years is what you're referring to. And I will say the real estate world that I've lived in the last almost 6 years, we were talking about those conversations when rates kept dropping, and it was if you're looking at just the pure economics of it, right, they should not have dropped that low, they should not have stayed that low, and they did. So that was a regular conversation in the world that I lived in.
So this pressure
Yeah.
is not going anywhere. As we learned, and I learned when I was up in D.C. last week, and I know this firsthand because I work with a bunch of them, builders are pulling back. They are not, so this is actually the first time we went backwards, projected to go backwards. So we've never caught up from the time of great unpleasantness. We've never caught up. We were, depending on who you talk to, Lawrence Yun says, Dr. Yun says 5 million, Lisa Sturvin says 3. We're several million units short. The builders are now contracting that. They are not going out to what they call their B and C sites, right? They're going to focus on their A sites. This is their prime.
Focus on their A sites. I mean, the one we work alongside, who you know, has indicated to us that, we had the conversation on our weekly conference call. I said, you want to go the spec route? He goes, I'm not even touching the spec.
Yeah.
He goes, unless it's a contract in hand, I'm not even going to crack ground. I mean, those are his exact words.
Yeah, correct. So my reference is to the larger developers and builders, that projects that they were looking outside the end of the rubber band, they are now terminating, right? And they are now moving back in and focusing on something closer to the core, whatever that might mean. So what that tells me is this lack of inventory is only going to get worse. Right,
Yes.
because
Yes.
the builders
Yes.
are not bringing units on, even though their numbers of sales are reducing, but they are offsetting bringing in there, and that's why I kind of needed the balance thing, right?
Yeah.
But
Totally.
to do that, so look, I'll go out on a limb here. I think this market, unless something happens out that we're not seeing out there, is going to be this market for a substantial period of time.
I think that's the case. My friend Frank Hardy on the feed. Frank, we love when you watch the show,
Hey,
my
Frank.
friend. This question's come in, and this question's from Heather. What could cause a down market for this area? Who wants to touch on that? And then a couple folks are saying the panel's very bullish and optimistic this morning. We'll leave it at that.
It's the coffee.
It's not optimism, though. That's
No,
the thing.
it's well, I think I don't want to speak for everyone,
Sure.
but even
Right.
though we see prices having a lot of strength because of the shortage of supply, unfortunately, no, it's not. It's not optimistic. It's still we still have some lingering symptoms from the Great Sickness.
So we're pricing it. It's not bullish. We're pricing ahead. We're
Yeah.
foreseeing and forecasting what's going ahead. What could go sideways?
What could cause a down market?
We talked about this. Out of control inflation. lending practices loosening up, when we start seeing these lending practices take hold, that they're loosening up, that is when we're going to be red flags are going to go into bells. There are a couple of lenders that we've been talking about are doing that on trial basis, but when it starts growing beyond that, when this goes back to this cup of coffee can buy a $500,000 house, that's when we're going to be in serious trouble. And let's face it, I'll be a little facetious here. I think that's the right word. If UVA goes away, right? When UVA is not going away.
Sure, if Inject shut down,
If
because of budget
Inject
cuts,
shuts down.
but this is
Yes.
not a safe world. I think Inject is going to be probably
Yeah.
hiring.
Well,
if
and here's
anything
the
else.
thing,
Yeah.
like when we're looking at that military community, they
Yeah.
project where they place what they may or
Decades
may
ahead.
not shut down. So
Yeah.
that's not something that should take us by surprise as an industry, because we should be paying attention to that and know. And last I checked, they're not on the list.
So my brother-in-law, James Watson,
He's watching.
is in that line of work, and he works for the DOD, or he works for a contractor, and he goes out and looks at installments and shut down, open up, and these are decade-long
Oh, yes.
processes and way in front of it.
No, I'm familiar
And
with
questions, comments, keep bringing them, guys. This question just came in. Do you think the 6%, Nikki, is the rate for a long period of time? Everyone's talking
that.
rates
I know,
now.
that's really like,
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to predict the future, y'all. Honestly, I kind of hope so, because I just feel like going too much higher is more than people can take mentally. Because I've truly been surprised by how hard it has been for people to accept where we are. And while I get it, I can sympathize. It's also like, well, this is what we've been talking about to some degree, maybe behind too many closed doors, I don't know. Since it went this low, it's like, oh, it has to come up.
So the experts, so I was in DC for a CEO and leadership thing. We had the CEOs of Bank of America, all the major US banks, and they're asked on a panel this very question. So it's funny, they used my line. They said, how about them Mets, right? They didn't want to answer it. But ultimately, when they got to it, they said, look, we're looking at around 6% plus or minus for the rest of this year. They're tracking exactly what Scott Morris from Ross Mortgage has been saying, is that we think somewhere in the second or third quarter of next year, it's going to be below 6, somewhere to the 4 to 6 range. The caveat to that, these are the same people that said at the beginning of this year we were never going over 4%.
Exactly.
So-
Exactly.
Full of doo-doo.
So,
Yeah.
you know, for what it's worth,
They're full of
that's what
doo-doo.
that's what
They're
they
full
were
of the
saying.
doo-doo. Jason, you wanted to say something.
I think a lot of that is going to be determined by the impact they have in reducing inflation on the federal level. I think as long as they still want to cool down the economy and those core rates get hiked and hiked and hiked, we'll probably see rates continue to climb. Still lower than the historic average, but for anyone I think a lot of people I think who ask this question think, is it ever going to be 2.75 again?
Well,
I don't.
we
I don't
won't be
see it.
around.
Yeah, right, exactly. At some
Yeah.
point it
Yeah.
will happen, but it's not going to be relevant to us here.
And if it does get to that point, you probably got a black swan event of some kind. So you probably don't want it to get to that.
No,
No one will be
right.
That's what
alive
you're
at that
saying.
point.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, and talking about the thing that could impact us negatively as far as the housing market, like I do want to go back to the fact that I agree with what Keith was saying. If we end up with, if we want to call it predatory lending, or if there's this gray area that some may think exists, that's going to be a really bad thing. That is what makes us different in such a large way from 2018, or wrong year, 2008, sorry, I added a 1, from 2008, 9, 10, right? That is a huge part of the conversation as to why that's not what's happening now. So if we move toward that, we're setting ourselves up and our community up and our neighbors up for failure in a huge way.
And often black swan events have a reverse impact, like a worldwide pandemic just threw a bunch of fuel on the fire in terms of our industry.
But
Yeah.
that was a pretty sharp V. We called that. That
Yep.
went down fast and went
And
up.
it rocketed up.
Yes.
Rocketed up. Interesting on the inflation front. I read an article on CNN. I think it was yesterday or Saturday, that Dollar General's largest growing customer. It makes between $75,000 and $100,000.
Oh, there was a stat in the local news at the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. 1 in 3 people coming to the food bank right now, both people in the household are fully employed.
Yes,
1 in 3.
Yeah.
Fully employed.
absolutely.
I
Think about that.
I ran out of
I
milk
do.
this weekend because I needed milk for my coffee because I'm I'm not a real man. I put milk in my coffee, okay, Nikki?
I won't judge you harshly.
I put milk
publicly
in my
anyway.
coffee, all right? I don't put sugar. Does that help me out a little
It
bit?
does,
There
it
you go.
does.
So there was no milk at Food Lion at Lake
Oh,
Monticello
yeah.
on a Sunday morning at 7 o'clock.
Yep.
What do you make of that?
I
Supply chain?
drank black coffee, which was not good.
What happened?
I just figured you didn't drink coffee, Keith.
I drank black coffee.
Spencer says this for the panel. How are the investors responding to this? The house flippers and the folks looking to make a buck on rents? That's a good question. Who wants to touch on that?
So I track the sales, and I go back and look. It's impossible to tell, but I'm not seeing a lot of LLCs buying right now.
Yeah.
That's not an official statistic or anything like that. It just seems that way. We're not getting any phone calls, hey, I'm ready to buy a flip, right? I think the prices are at such a point and the cost of money is so expensive that I think that's kind of timed out a little bit. But
Yeah.
from my market, that's what I'm seeing.
And I think those who have engaged in flips, so long as their plan B was sound and they knew they could rent it profitably, there's a lot of money to be made in rentals right now. So the flip and rent is probably going to be more of a thing that occurs, but I'm just not seeing it as much. And I'm also not seeing anyone buy homes for kids attending university right now either.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
Well,
advice.
that's because
Yeah.
what is there to buy that's reasonably priced, right? And so I ran before the show. I ran some quick numbers on Lake Monticello because we talked about this on Friday. I love the panel's opinion on it. We are in a housing recession as far as volume goes, right?
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
number of units being so, but are we in a housing recession as far as value goes, what they're selling for? Just some quick numbers. I went back to 2018. 2018, Lake Monticello only, right? Single family detaches, no attached products there anyway. There was 209 units sold in 18, 31 days. Median sales price was $215. In 19, 292, 30 days on market. Median sales price was 222. 20, 226 was sold, 20 days on market. This is year to date, guys. 231. 21, 256, 5 days on market, 267. This year, we've gone down to 196 units sold, 5 days on market, 315. So we jumped in 1 year from 261 to 315. The rest of the years were kind of nice, simple 6%, 3% year over year when you start looking at the numbers. 18, 19, 20, 21 was a big jump. That was 231 to 267. But in 18 and 19, this was this normal 6, 7, 5%.
So no one sees drops in values here at this table? There was Paul's here.
Perceived
yeah.
maybe because of the price reductions, but I don't think
Right.
there's true drop in value happening,
Exactly. I think that's a drop in projection.
Okay.
Right. I think
Yes.
that's what I've been seeing. But like Keith says, there are going to be little markets where they're really marching to the beat of a different drum. And
So
we'll
price
probably see that more
reductions,
and more.
let's make sure we get clarity here.
Yeah.
Price reductions is not a reduction in sales price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So price reduction is as I went in. keep
Okay,
it-
let me throw a scenario to you.
Sales prices to sales prices is what?
Here's the scenario. Let's call it from June 2020 to what? March of 2022. Okay, we have what is that? 19 months? It was bananas out there.
Yes.
Absolutely bananas. Homes were selling for crazy values. There was appraisal gap, cash being brought to the table, multiple offers. It was
Complementary
bananas.
seller possession.
You coined that. You coined that. Quentin's watching over here, Jason. Complimentary seller possession. He branded that phrase. I love that about you, Jason Kerr. So it was bananas out there.
Yes.
Now it's not bananas.
Right.
Okay? So if two homes side by side, one sold during the bananas period of time for X amount of dollars, and the home right next to it is selling right now for X amount of dollars minus 10%, 15%, will that not eventually cause the home that sold during the crazy period to drop in value?
So I'm going to answer this and jump in on this.
Yeah.
Because this house that we went under contract this weekend was right next to a home that we sold a year and a half ago.
Okay,
It's almost identical homes.
Okay.
50 grand higher. And I won't, it's.
what was the price point?
It was $500,000. 400. It was high fours, low fives at Lake Monticello.
Okay.
Side by side, same exact period. There was differences, right? Each home's a little bit differently, but in the same market. And
How can the home
I
next to
literally
it,
ran the numbers to prove that.
how can the home next to it in Charlottesville and Albemarle County? Let's talk Charlottesville and Albemarle County here. If the home next to it is selling at a price point that's less than the home right next door, isn't that not a comp?
It is a comp, but it all comes down to the duration at which we look at these. So if you were to ask me, are prices retreating a little bit from March? I personally think so. Don't necessarily have hardcore numbers to justify that, but it's just how I feel, definitely. But if we were to look year over year, the story of this year was written in January through March, January through April, and I don't think the retreat back over the past 60 days is going to balance that out. So instead of, we were looking at 20% year over year, right? And if we retreat, say 3 to 5%, then we're still looking at a pretty amazing year for 2022 for appreciation.
So you're saying you've seen side-by-side homes, same exact homes in the city of Charlottesville sell.
I'm just talking, just take my neighborhood.
Got it.
Where I'm at right now. The homes that we're selling in March, we're selling at crazy numbers. Those exact houses, same lot size, same year, same style, same everything, are going through price reductions on the MLS
So the
now.
last Monday of this month, we're going to have Jeff Gaffney, and we're going to literally.
And it's not just Glenmore.
And
It's
we're gonna-
other neighborhood. Look at the city of Charlottesville.
So that goes
I feel
back.
this too.
Yeah.
But that goes back.
Look at Rugby Road.
But that goes back to my micro market.
Yeah, you're talking about micro markets.
Micro market. It's literally going to be different from neighborhood to neighborhood, street to street.
Look at Redfields. Look at
Yeah,
Whittington.
but
Look
you're
at Oak Hill Farm.
But you're looking at large projects, areas where you're going to have one.
These are neighborhoods.
I understand that. From one street to another, it could be that much different. Is it the right features, the right conditions? Do I have to put money in it? Don't I have to put money in it? The proof's in the pudding. We're going to have this debate about a year from now and figure out who was right and who was wrong on that end of it. But I think when you start looking at micro markets, that's when the pros show up, right? That's when the professionals show up and help a client through that. I'm just giving you a real world side by side, Lake Monticello. It happened this weekend.
Look at Old Trail.
Yeah. Well, I can't because I don't have the data in front of me. So.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a difference between looking at quarter to quarter versus week to week, month to month.
So it depends on
Right.
what you're talking about. Yeah, if we're talking year over year, and if we're looking at the percentages of growth and we're viewing a softening, not as a decline. Also, we're talking about that lower price point that used to exist continues to rise regardless of the interest rates rising. So that has
Yes.
that is continuing to rise. So if we're looking at averages or medians even, I think we're still going to see those numbers increase while also experiencing exactly what you're talking about on that micro level.
So next Wednesday, Woody Fincham's going to be sitting in that seat with us, Nikki, and I'm actually going to reach out to Woody and say, this is a guy that knows this stuff intimately.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? What are you projecting? So that's a question for an expert on next Wednesday.
What do you think, Jason Kirby?
Nice.
A lot of the conversations I have with sellers right now, they lead with, I know I'm not going to get what I would have gotten in April, but what can we get? So they do recognize that. They're still getting a hell of a lot more than they would have gotten last year.
Keith?
Yeah, I think the proof's going to be in the pudding, right? It's going to see how we're going to shake it out. What I don't want this conversation to go to the point that people are afraid to list and afraid to buy, right? That's what the national media is putting out there. That's what Matt Neese was commenting on, right? When you look at this thing in a big macro perspective, it gets scary. That 700% number,
Yeah.
right? It scares the hell out of people.
Yeah.
Well, what does it really mean? Well, what it means is you're going from, single digits to double digits.
Right.
You're not going to 60 days or 90 days on market, or you're not reducing price value tremendously.
Right, and oftentimes you'll see like, the headlines might be like, rates of appreciation have dropped 80%. Well, that's the reduction in the rate of increase. That's a completely made-up number, but there's an example of a rising price, just not rising as fast.
How about this question that's come in the feed? This is a good one and a tough one. Are you guys ready for
They're
this?
always tough.
Always.
This one's tough. Jerry, the local jurisdictions are now talking about raising assessments again. How is that going to impact the market when interest rates are higher and local government is talking about more taxes on rooftops? Who wants to go down that road? Year over year in the city
So
of
the Mets
Charlottesville,
are really doing
assessments-
good this year.
Year over year in the city of Charlottesville,
My mother
real estate
actually
taxes
switched
went
from
up
a
12%.
Wow.
Year over year, they went up
Yeah.
12%. 2021, 2022, 12% increase on average.
So here's the
City of
scary,
Charlottesville.
here's the scary thought on that comment. So this world I know well. This conversation about rate increase never really happens till like 1 or 2 months before it has to be done, which is in April, May and April of at the end of the first quarter. They usually start that conversation. The fact that most jurisdictions are having this conversation right now, they're projecting less income
Yeah.
in their budgets.
Right, and that's the conversations they're having. So what are your thoughts on that, Keith Smith?
Yeah, I mean, the thoughts are, we're going to keep a close eye on it. We're going to bring the elected officials to sit in these 2 chairs and start asking those questions. But, you know, the city, the counties, they're a business, right? And most counties, I can speak to Fluvanna County, 97% of our revenue comes from rooftops, from residential. They can't go out and sell more. They can't create another business model to raise money. This is how. So this is what this is their venue of increasing or creating revenue. What may happen, and as a housing affordability advocate around the country, what I am concerned about is if we start getting a little more recessionary next year, a little bit more increase of inflation. There's going to be less money in the coffers for the governments and the counties to help housing affordability. And I'm actually publicly talking about that at these meetings because that's what the governments do, right? All of a sudden they'll shut the cookie jar down when they really should be opening it at that point. But that's my soapbox for the moment.
New questions come in. Anyone want to touch on that before the next question?
I mean, just that I'm not surprised. Everything that the county or the city is going to have to purchase or hire out to have done, it costs much more than it did a year ago.
Yeah.
So when I see inflation, I expect, unfortunately, my taxes are probably going to go up because they're, like you said, Keith, they're a business that functions and they're going to have more costs.
I mean,
Not knowing anything about
the
the
fact
budgets.
that Dollar General's largest growing buyer profile makes almost 6 figures is concerning to me.
Yeah.
It's not that it's a great, it's not a great place to buy things and all this kind of great stuff, but that is a statistic that nobody's talking about, that this market is starting, from that perspective, is shifting a little bit.
Making 6 figures it's just kind of like $1 million home is not $1 million home. It's the same with income. It's not the same. When I was in high school, my goal was to figure out how to make $50,000 a year. You can't live here on that. It's not the same. So when we're looking at 6 figures, though, it does not carry the same weight that it once did.
This is an interesting question. Kelsey, for the panel, what value or price point will hold their worth the best throughout this? I think we all see tough times ahead. Anyone want to touch on that?
Try that question again.
Yeah. read it
What
again.
value or price point will hold its worth the most? We all see tough times ahead.
Like, again, to go back to micro markets, there are so many exceptions to this rule, but if you're buying in the price point in which there isn't new construction, that's often a sound approach.
Tell me about that.
Which is
Yeah.
harder. I had this client once, this is going back a few years, when this specific question came up. She could afford a $400,000, at that time, newer townhome, brand new, in Cascadia, or a lovely townhouse that met her needs in River Run for $195. And she said, I can do either. What should I do? I said, well, this isn't your forever home, you've told me. And when you call me in 3 or 4 years, I would like for you to be in the River Run townhouse because they're building a hell of a lot of those townhomes for $400,000. And when I talk to her a couple times a year now, I'm so grateful she bought the thing that they're not making anymore, nor can they afford to build anymore. So I think if you're looking at this big picture like that, if you could actually design your life like that, which is hard, that's a pretty sound approach.
You know what I heard in that statement, what you just said? It tells me how awesome you are. You stay in contact with the client on a regular basis,
He
3 or
definitely
4
does.
times a year.
And recommended the lower purchase.
And
Just
do you
saying.
know how awesome that is? Do you know how
But
many?
you made that point on previous shows is like, what was your point? It was like the agents, so many of us, once the deal is done, forget to follow up.
97
Where you
yeah.
like follow up and follow up and follow up some more.
97% of buyers cannot remember who their agent was. according to NAR. 97%. It's a huge number.
Really?
It is a
Oh, yeah.
huge. It is
It's
a
bad.
huge number. It's 97, maybe 95, but it's in the 90s for sure. Do not remember who their agent is because their agent doesn't stay in contact with them. And thank you for doing that because that's something we all teach and mentor.
Yeah.
Is stay in contact. So you made a sale, you made a transaction, and you've been staying in contact. You say 3 or 4 times a year?
Oh, yeah, and I've helped family and friends and whatnot,
Yeah.
but really, I think also I'm lucky. I have great clients that are easy to want to be in contact with, so
Well,
it's nice.
Matt Neese, welcome to the program.
Hey, Matt.
I said, Matt, your post from this morning has created a foundation of content for today's show, and it sincerely did. It was very authentic and to the point. Paul McCarter is watching from Avenue, agents from Nest, Long & Foster, Real Estate 3, a ton at Keller Williams on the program right here. Paul is, in a sarcastic way, also very concerned about increasing property taxes, property tax rates and assessments. And what that's going to do to the market as well. That's the conversation being had now.
Yeah, so it's also going to get worse because there's no more new developments, new construction.
That's
happening,
why.
right? So the
Yeah,
volume
yeah.
of units to go against, and I was at a 9/11 service yesterday evening at the Lake Monticello Fire Department and had all the Board of Supervisors from Fluvanna County. And, the bottom line is I don't see any new residential developments happening in Fluvanna County for an extended period of time because they just don't want any more in their county for whatever reason, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Sure.
As a resident of Fluvanna County, I know their budget's going up because it will go up. It always goes up. And they're not changing this 96, 97, 95%, depending on how you talk to, from my rooftop. So guess what? I'm going up.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Nikki,
going
what do
up.
you think?
Well, I think one of the things that came up at the Economic Summit last Thursday, was the way it was said, I disagree with, but I think the intent behind it, it was saying that buyers are gravitating more toward attached housing. Well, and it's not that I disagree with what was said, I think I disagree with what was left out. And that is because that is what they can afford. And we live in areas where often attached housing is discouraged by our zoning regulations. So there are options to help open up more housing for people. It's just a matter of what we're willing to have and want to provide that.
Daniel Pennant, huge proponent of attached housing. Very good comment right there from Nikki Chambliss. Keith, I see the wheels turning over there.
The wheels are turning because I'm looking at Albemarle County stats as we were talking. But you're 100% right. What's interesting though, and I'm seeing that in something, multifamily is growing like crazy, and one who's, as far as new construction goes, and one who's been around the block a little bit on this, that's usually the first thing that starts going, right? When the housing market is about ready to go backwards, the indicator is commercial stops and multifamily stops, and it stops big time and fast. And once that happens, generally single family detached and attached, so townhomes and single families on the new construction starts creeping in. And historically, at least for the last 3.5 decades, it always starts west and it works its way east. Remember the time of great unpleasantness? All this started in California, Seattle, the West Coast, and worked its way to the East Coast. So I'm tracking multifamily a lot, and I'm tracking commercial starts, and I'm also talking to a bunch of civil engineers that I work with, and they have, unless they pull the project from them, 3 to 4 years of civil work just on the books with no new clients coming in.
Megan has this comment for Jason and Nikki specifically. Jerry, we have Keith's take on the Bank of America and city lending programs. Can you ask Nikki and Jason their take on these programs?
Would you like to go first?
Not really.
Remember, how about them Mets?
The viewers and listeners are quite smart.
I don't know specific details of the program. I've read a few headlines. I read a slew of comments, which does not make me an expert. However, there are a couple of concerns I have regarding any program like that, and not just to pick on a company like Bank of America, because we should pick on Wells Fargo. We're going to pick on Bank of America too.
I would agree with
I'm
that.
concerned when I remember 06, 07, 08, as the market was becoming saturated and truly a lot of scraping was going on by practitioners in the industry, it seemed as if subprime lending came for those most vulnerable toward the end of the cycle. And this left a lot of people without a chair when the music stopped. And there were many folks buying homes who could not afford a roof repair or an HVAC replacement or, gosh, so much stuff. And so I do become concerned. I think the intention of the program seems incredibly noble, but when I look at what little details I did, I became very concerned and wondered if it could be something that would easily backfire on the people that they are trying to help. I also was wondering, from just a rather skeptical point of view, is this more just for statement of intent to attract attention rather than anyone really truly being able to qualify for the program they're laying out?
Nicely done.
So I don't disagree with any of that at all. Starting with, I don't know the details well enough. This has been a conversation that has been happening kind of around, and I've been dipping into, and I have not taken the time to really look up the specifics. I do think that where we should start all of these conversations with is, if you're looking to buy a house, go to a mortgage broker, please. Go to a place that is what they do 24/7, all day long, every day. And I'm not sure if I should call it companies or not, but personally I bank with USAA and maybe Federal. And if I'm getting a loan for a home, a mortgage, I'm going to go to one of our local lenders all day, every day.
Yeah.
And I have lists of great lenders. Cannot use them all. And I have a list day after day of people who are worth spending time with, who are worth connecting with and learning from, so that you have the best product possible, right? And if you're doing that, then none of that matters. None of this conversation matters at all. And if you are looking at things that are tempting, I do feel very, very concerned that the people that they are trying to help, and I'm going to just come at this from the assumption that they are truly trying to help people, I think it's putting them possibly at risk. And the idea of, hey, let's go for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's wonderful, but let's not set them up for further damage. We have history, years and years, from our very origins, has been horrible toward the exact people that we're talking about
an
helping
abomination,
here.
truly.
Our industry has been the problem. Let's not continue that.
So in that, great answers, guys.
Yeah.
You guys did enough research without even doing research, because you kind of hit the points right on. But to Nikki's point about that, we are at the front lines and the trusted advisors on that. In this conversation I had with the first-time home buyer, affordable housing buyer for a $215,000 house, there's a required 3% down payment for the loan program that has on it, which is very similar terms and conditions of this loan program, by the way, on that end of it. And this woman, a single female teacher with a child, goes, well, I've got X amount of dollars. I want to put that all so my monthly payment is less. And I said, great. New construction house, you probably won't have a problem for a year. But what happens on year 2? And your refrigerator goes, right? Oh, so I've been renting my whole life. So we sat down and on a Sunday afternoon, had a conversation. I said, look, talk to the trusted advisor, talk to the loan officer, see what you can afford. But my advice to you is keep a little cash aside, because you're going to be a homeowner now, right? And there may be something that pops up that you have to do that. And she thanked me for that, because her mindset was, I'm going to put all this money in it so I had a less monthly payment. So instead of, having an extra $20 or $15 payment, right, she keeps keeping several $1,000s cash for emergencies.
Michael Guthrie, watching the program,
Hey,
just
Michael.
sent me a text, watching the show as we speak. We appreciate you, Michael Guthrie. So panel, what is the counsel you're offering? I mean, you got some agents and quite a few people watching here. With Q4 around the corner, we know as the holidays transpire and happen, we start having friends and family over, and then we start seeing maybe the idiosyncrasies of our house, the flaws of our house, and that encourages people come spring to say, hey, maybe it's time for something new. So as we head into the holidays, what's the counsel, Jason, you're offering everyone that's watching?
Typically, when I'm working with clients like that, we try to define exactly what it is they want to change or what they would like that would make their life easier. And then we kind of war game and look at, okay, what would that cost? Let's look at prices right now. And not only the price, but what is it going to cost in terms of monthly? So really, it involves a long conversation to just plan out the next 10 steps to make sure, all right, does this make sense? Should we be thinking about putting your home on the market? In terms of, and by the way, I think getting that done before the holidays is key.
Well, you
when
have
we
to
think
find somebody.
when we think about buyers, I think it's an incredible opportunity if you're out and you need a home and you're shopping for a home right now. Had a client get closing costs covered, traditional inspection just the other day, and the market is far gentler to people who are out there looking for homes right now.
Well, you have to call ISC to help you with that. They'll get it done before the holidays, for
Interstate
sure.
Service Company,
Service.
Home's best friend, Nikki Chambliss.
Oh gosh. Okay. So when you first started out, my brain, that question, I don't know where it landed because my brain grabbed onto the beginning, and it was, what would you say to our audience about this next quarter? And I would say, for the last 2 years, you could be a realtor and be successful and have some really great income and help some people just by being there, by having speed. And we are not in that market anymore. We are now in a market where we are moving from that speed being the important thing, and it's still important, right? You can't sit around twiddling your thumbs, but we're really moving back toward that skill being more required than ever, and showing what that skill is, telling that story. Who are you? What are you about? You can't sit there and know what you're about and not say it. And I am guilty of this probably as much, if not more than everyone else. I realize, oh, I know what I'm about. And the people close to me that I talk to all the time know what I'm about. But then I realize, oh, I've not been telling my story well, right? So if you're out there in this industry trying to do well, trying to succeed, and you want to be part of that group that is going to stay in this as a career and building a business, you need to make sure that people know what you're about. And you need to make sure that what you're about is something that you want out there.
Michael Guthrie has a question for us, or he's just
He
chiming in?
just texted me and sent me a link to his blog. That he said, I thought you might enjoy my blog given how you opened the show this morning. And he shared me a link to thankfulandallthings.com.
Well, Michael, thank you, and thank you for the shout out when I got the award next week. That meant the world to me. I texted him because the Howard Hanna president was giving a presentation. So, crystal ball. All of us been in the industry for a while. What year do you think next year is going to be similar to, right? And are we looking closer to 2018, 2019 on that? Just the way it feels, and us being professionals.
Do you have a thought?
I think it's going to be incomparable.
Incomparable.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't compare it to quite anything else. With
Wow.
Yeah.
potentially rising rates and dwindling inventory,
That's a good point.
fewer new construction starts, it's going to be something that's going to be, it's going to take us all by surprise, and I think it's just going to be different than anything we've seen before.
Any loan officers watching?
Yeah, we got Fulton Bank, Atlantic Union Bank, both on the feed as we speak.
So can you ask, for the loan officers out there, 2018, what was the average mortgage rate for a 30-year?
Okay,
Right,
put that right there.
on that end of it, because I've got that. I'm going to jump in on that once we get that number for a specific, I can speak English.
4.54.
4.54.
It's much lower than where we're at now.
So I'm trying to figure out when the last year we were at 5.5, 6%.
See, that was before I was in.
Yeah, on that end compared to it. So I just ran some quick numbers for Charlottesville, right? Single family detached, no attached homes on that end of it. In 2018, 323 units were sold, 6 days on market, 359. Last year, year to date, these are year to date numbers, was 317, 5 days on market, 485. So in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we jumped up from 359 to 485 in value. We're pretty darn close to the number of units. Not 323 versus 317, and the days on market is pretty much the same.
Daniel says the last time mortgage rates were at over 6 on average for the year was 2008.
2008. So I'm going to look what sold in 2008.
2008 was a tricky period of time over
Yes.
there.
Let's see.
We'll leave
Let's-
it
And it was
at that.
such a different market.
This question's come in. I don't, do we want to
Don't mention that year,
I know,
please.
Jesus, God, please.
We're not diving
I'm
into
good
that
with
year,
it. I'm having
y'all.
fun.
No.
So this question has come up for Jason specifically. Are home inspection negotiations and contingencies back to being a reality? And the follow-up is, how many sellers are covering closing costs at this period of time, and will this continue?
So I think what we're seeing is when closing cost coverage is a thing that would benefit a buyer, is we're still talking about giving the seller list price in many cases. We're not in the kind of place where we're going with list price and getting our credit. We're going over list and getting that credit in those cases. So the seller is feeling made whole, assuming the home is priced correctly. And when it comes to inspections, I have had multiple transactions lately where it was a simple pass-fail inspection. There was one where there were no inspections, but sellers seem way more open to having a traditional inspection if they're not getting another offer in the door. So if you're the only one that showed up to the dance, you can kind of call the tune within reason. And if there are other people that are there too, that's when you start talking about reverting back to what we were seeing in April, May, June.
Keith, you want to touch that?
I'm running numbers for 2008. It's actually interesting. 282 units sold in 2008. So that's 35 less than what we just sold, same period. 69 days on market though. Right back
Yeah,
to that 60-day mark
Yeah.
that I've been talking about for a while. To me, in our region, certain regions it's 90 days, but in our market, I think when you start hitting this getting close to 60 days, that's when that pendulum is starting to swing fully onto the other side. 298 versus 485 though in sales price between 2008. I apologize. Let me see if I got 485. So 298 to 485. Total number of units are 35 off 282 versus 317. Days on market are usually different because of the time of great unpleasantness.
Johnny Ornelas, owner of El Mariachi in Guadalajara. Hello, everyone. I think it would be a great start if Bank of America and other banks that want to help would work with people for Piedmont Housing Alliance to make sure the buyer can be ready to take that type of loan on. It's very well said.
Yes.
So I'll add to that. Piedmont Housing Alliance is a CDFI, and they actually would be involved in it if it ever came to our local market. So
Yeah.
good call.
Nikki, you want some closing thoughts for the viewers and listeners?
Oh gosh, well I don't know. I'm thinking about Piedmont Housing Alliance right now and the Virginia Housing and the options that they have. I think sometimes we forget that they exist, and especially when it comes to Piedmont Housing Alliance, if you're planning ahead, which really ideally everyone should be for purchasing a home, then you have enough room, and it's still a loan that you can still buy a home in this market. Because of that whole, we're taking a deep breath, right? We're back to something that feels a little more normal. Don't forget that that's an option, whether it's you as a buyer or you're a realtor and you have clients. If you're not familiar with that program, please get familiar with it.
Good take.
They're great people. They do wonderful things. They are actually helping with affordable housing in our community.
Very well said.
I can speak to that because we're in partners with them, and I chair the land trust, and they're awesome partners.
Jason Kirby.
Just in these more trying times and certain times, I think the things that I'm reminded of a lot now, day in, day out, working with clients and agents, is that we are fiduciaries for our clients, and we're here to put their interests far, far ahead of our own. And I think more than ever, they need us to give them good advice. And like Keith, you hit on it earlier, there are times when, hey, you know what? My recommendation is don't put your home on the market. I think it's wise to hang on to it. It seems to meet your needs, or a buyer. Let's wait. If they're just not a good match for what's going on, it kind of comes back to that.
So in the last 12 months, how often have you had that conversation? Rough number. A couple times, a dozen
Maybe
times?
5-6 times, where, I had definitely sellers where it just didn't make even financial sense for them to go do what they were thinking about doing.
And we do that because we want to make a customer for life.
Yes. Yeah.
Relationships for life.
Yeah.
Keith Smith.
Yeah, it always amazes me when we get roundtables like this, and
I love it.
One of my famous sayings: "If you think you're the smartest person in the room, get a new room."
Yes.
So I am amongst very smart people, so I'm being learned. So thank you much for educating Smith here, and I can't wait to do it again.
4 current or former CAR presidents 7 firms watching the show in some capacity, and viewers and listeners that are extremely sophisticated. These folks are the best of the best. Jason Kirby of the Beckham team. Nikki Chambliss is a team leader at Keller Williams Alliance. Keith Smith, one of the principals at Yes Realty Partners. Honest is a common denominator with this panel right here. Honest and hardworking. The show is presented by Keller Williams Alliance. Judah Wickower is our director. The I Love Seville show is up in 58 minutes, and it should be red hot. Thank you kindly for joining us on Real Talk. We'll see you guys very shortly. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
nicely
Thank
done.
you.
You guys are excellent. We should do this panel again. Seriously.
Yes.